Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We are here live on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel on Wednesday, March 26th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, as we are every single Wednesday of the calendar year. We have a plenty to talk about today, obviously, as we are rolling into the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. We will give some thoughts from the first round. I was in Milwaukee for the games up there. Obviously, that included Kentucky's wins over Troy and Illinois. And we will talk about that trip out to Milwaukee a little bit, as well as some overall big picture thoughts from the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament. But mostly, we're going to just dive into previewing the Sweet 16. I will once again have boots on the ground this weekend coming from Indianapolis, continuing to follow the Cats as long as I can this season. But obviously, as we always do here on All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey, we will be talking about all teams across the country. But first, as you are all getting in here live today, please make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. I just posted a Chalk Talk episode this morning where I broke down Kentucky's defensive execution against Illinois. I think those of you that really enjoy my film breakdowns will like diving into the film room with me to break down Kentucky's defense in that matchup. I'll probably have some more of those as the NCAA tournament goes on as well. So again, please make sure you are subscribed to us here at the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. Leave this video a like. As always, hop into the chat as well. You can leave a comment, and we will go back and forth throughout today's episode. That always makes things flow and be a little bit more fun as well when I can interact with those of you that are watching. Then also, please make sure you are following me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR, the best place to stay up to date with everything that I'm doing this time of year. But looking back to the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament, obviously, I would say that the storyline is the lack of madness here in March Madness. There were no 13, 14, 15, or 16 seed upsets in round one. We only have one double-digit seed advancing here into the second weekend to the Sweet 16, and that's obviously an Arkansas team that doesn't, certainly feel like a Cinderella necessarily. So we've been pretty quiet in terms of the madness. Colorado State almost gave us a bit of a Cinderella as a 12 seed, but Derek Queen made what has become a controversial shot because he may or may not have traveled on that play. But nonetheless, Maryland was able to upend Colorado State in the end to keep them out of the Sweet 16. And otherwise, there weren't that many upsets. But I will say, I think this is what a lot of us expected going into this year, because we felt like the top of the NCAA this year was simply different and better than the rest of it. Now, I think, and myself included on this show, was talking about primarily like I really thought the national champion was going to come from the one seeds. I had all 4 1 seeds in my final four. I thought it was going to be a pretty chalky bracket up at the very top. I'm not sure I felt like that was going to extend as far down the bracket as it did, where we just quite simply did not see very many first or certainly second round upsets. But I do think that the result of that, and this is something that I've always said about the NCAA tournament, is that upsets are fun in the moment. And I think especially for the casual fan, it can be fun because you don't necessarily care about the quality of the basketball, or you're not going to get extra hype about watching Houston versus Purdue. It would be more fun if it was Houston versus McNeese to you because it's a fun story. But I do think that for kind of the diehard basketball fans and for hoop heads and those that really want to sit there and watch high quality basketball, a lack of upsets makes for a better second weekend of the NCAA tournament. It just does, because you have all the best teams playing. Like it's neat to watch these 12 and 13 seeds make a little bit of a run, but then usually at some point they get outclassed. And then you get kind of a crappy game in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight whenever it finally happens. And this year, I think you're just set up to have a bunch of heavyweight fights, quite frankly, in the Sweet 16. Because again, the only double-digit seed is an Arkansas team that isn't built like your everyday Cinderella necessarily. So I think it's going to make for a very, very high quality second weekend coming up here. We have a couple comments from Travis Shoemaker saying it's because Florida Atlantic has star players, best players on all these teams. Let's go back to UConn's first title run with Hurley. It was kind of not fun watching that Final Four. I agree. Yeah, I mean, like it's like I said, I think it's neat in the moment, like when you're sitting around with your buddies at a bar on Thursday or Friday or Saturday or Sunday of the first weekend, and there's that 13 seed that beats the 4. Like, oh man, that's so cool, that's so exciting. Or when that same 13 seed goes on and wins and makes it to the Sweet 16, like, oh man, like that's such a great run, and someone's going to hire that coach, and we're going to see these guys playing elsewhere next year. Like, that's all fine. And then that team plays a 1 seed and they lose by 33 on Thursday or Friday of this week, and it's like, oh well, that was kind of an underwhelming Sweet 16. Or to take it even further, to Travis's point, to when those teams make a run to the Final Four. But it is interesting to watch those Florida Atlantic guys. I mean, you got John L. Davis, who's certainly a big part of Arkansas making their run to the Sweet 16. You have Elijah Martin, who certainly is a big part of Florida and their excellence this year. You have Vlad Golden, who's a big part of Michigan moving on. So yeah, you have a lot of these former Florida Atlantic guys. And then, thinking back too, I mean, when San Diego State made their run to the tournament, you have Lamont Butler, who's a big part of Kentucky making it to Sweet 16. So like some of these teams that have made runs in the past, you're seeing them continue to have an impact on winning as they've matriculated on to high major programs. That's really fun to watch that part of the storyline as well. But yeah, as I said, obviously not a whole lot of madness to begin the tournament. And now, because it's been pretty chalky, like I'm not sure if there's a whole lot of madness to be had, because you can see a lot of these teams making a run. Again, I still think that the 1 seeds are in a class of their own, and that you're going to continue to see them move on. I predicted 13 of the 16 Sweet 16 teams, so I did pretty well in terms of the bracket there, though I did have Marquette moving on to the Elite 8, so obviously I've already missed that one, and then I had St. John's in the Elite 8 as well, so I am already down 2 of my Elite 8, but did pretty well getting 13 of the 16 Final Fours, all 4 Final Fours teams still alive. As I said, I did pick completely chalk all 1 seeds in the Final Four. But let's go ahead and start here in the South region as we do. We'll just talk about these matchups a little bit, starting with number 1 seed Auburn playing number 5 seed Michigan. I think the primary storyline here is certainly going to be Janai Broome banging around inside with Vlad Golden. Michigan has a ton of size, not just with Vlad Golden, but with what Danny Wolf, as a fellow 7-footer, brings to them as a skilled 4-man that can spread the floor a little bit, that can really, really pass. I just don't know if this Michigan team has the backcourt strength to keep up with Auburn and the pressure they're going to be able to provide with, guys like Denver Jones, certainly Chad Baker-Mazara out on the wing as well. I think over the course of 40 minutes, Auburn will be able to overwhelm Michigan in the backcourt. Then when you have Janai Broome, when you have Dylan Cardwell, and those sort of guys up front, I think it'll be enough to kind of at least play that to even, if not still outplay Michigan in the front corner. I think the toughness of Bruce Pearl's team will be enough for Auburn to advance there. Then you have number 2 seed Michigan State against number 6 seed Ole Miss. For the tournament, if you watched my bracket reveal last Wednesday here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball, or on All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey, I had Ole Miss advancing past Michigan State to make the Elite 8. I still think there's a pretty good chance of that happening. I think that this Ole Miss team can really, really shoot it from beyond the arc. They certainly proved that in their first couple of games of the NCAA tournament. I love Sean Padula. I love Matthew Morrell. I love Jalen Murray as well. Those guys can all really get hot from 3-point range, and they've continued to do so far in March Madness. Add in Jamin Brakefield, Dre Davis, Malik Dia, all those guys. I'm a big fan of Coach Chris Beard's team. I was able to watch them in person against Iowa State some on Sunday in Milwaukee, and I think that this team is built to pull off the upset against a team like Michigan State. Jace Richardson probably had his bad game of the tournament against New Mexico, and they were still able to survive. And I've sang the praises of Coach Tom Izzo's team throughout this season. I just think there's something about this Ole Miss squad, and certainly being battle tested coming out of the SEC. I think that this is a team that you can see knock off Michigan State when they take the floor. Let's see, is that a Friday? That is a Friday game as well. Moving on to the West region, you have 1 seed Florida, number 4 seed Maryland. Maryland's another team that I've been a big fan of throughout this season. We obviously saw Derek Queen hit the game winner against Colorado State to get the Terrapins here to the Sweet 16, but Jacoby Gillespie and those guys in the backcourt are certainly capable of continuing Maryland's success here. But Florida has Walter Clayton Jr. Florida has Elijah Martin, who we've already mentioned. Obviously, in the front court, you got Alex Condon, Thomas Hawk, Micah Hanglot, and all those guys. Will Richard in between on the wing as well. I continue to think this Florida team is the full package. Now, it was a struggle against UConn. Travis just timed in and said, I can't believe Florida pulled it out against UConn. I can't really either, having watched essentially all 40 minutes of that game where they were able to find a way to get it done. And sometimes I think, especially for 1 seeds, teams that maybe it's been a while since they faced some adversity, I think that the games like that can honestly then kind of catapult them forward, because now Coach Todd Golden's been able to spend a week in the film room kind of reminding these guys how fragile life can be in the NCAA tournament, because they almost lost it. And I think that you'll see this team now be able to come together and be like, hey, man, like we didn't like that feeling of almost going home. And yeah, Walter Clayton Jr. definitely was a big reason for that. But I think that they just have still more pieces than this Maryland team does. I think Maryland's starting 5 is as good as anybody's, but there's just no real depth there. And I think that even position by position, I like Julian Reese and Derek Queen in the front court, but I think Florida's backcourt, even with as much as I like Jacoby Gillespie, I think Florida's backcourt can move them on to the Elite 8 here. The Texas Tech Arkansas matchup out there in the West region certainly is an interesting one. It sounds like Adu Fierro might be able to come back and give Arkansas some minutes. I questioned the idea of playing Boogie Fland quite frankly when he was able to return. I just didn't know, like, hey, is throwing a guy in there for the first time in a month plus, 6 weeks plus, however long it's been in the NCAA tournament, what you really want to do, even with as talented as Boogie Fland is. But he's done fine. He had 6 points and 3 assists in their win over Kansas, and then backed it up with what did he have? So 6 more points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists in their win over St. John. So now that he's had another week, he's gotten 2 games under his belt, continuing to get his footing. John L. Davis continues to play well. Billy Richmond's coming off of a really big game. Jonas Adu has been excellent for the Razorbacks. If you add Adu Fierro, another athletic piece in there against this Texas Tech team, I know how good JT Toppin is for the Red Raiders, and you're coming off a game where Darion Williams was excellent, had 28 points in the win over Drake. Elijah Hawkins is playing at a high level. He had 16 points and 7 assists against Drake in that win to get the Red Raiders to the Sweet 16. But genuinely across the board from a talent level, like, it's not that lopsided for a 3-10 matchup, especially if Adu Fierro comes back. I think this Arkansas team with Coach Calipari, like, I think they're going to give Texas Tech everything they want. I'm not gonna pick Arkansas, because I think Texas Tech's going to shoot better than 2 of 14 from 3 like they did against Drake. That they shot 13 of 46, which obviously isn't good either, but they were able to make a bunch of them against UNC Wilmington. If they're able to make some threes, this team is 37.1% from 3 on the season. They're bound to shoot better at some point. I think that they'll probably find a way to do that against Arkansas in advance, but that's a very, very intriguing first-round matchup, in my opinion. Duke, Arizona, another very fun matchup, because I think Caleb Love was put on this earth to go play Duke in the Sweet 16. He's been itching for this game for a long time. He was absolutely outstanding in that win over Oregon late on Sunday night. I believe he had 29 points in that game. We all know the story with Caleb Love, though. As easily as he can go out and win 29 points on 18 shots, 9 rebounds, 4 assists in that win over Oregon, just as easily as he can go do that, he can also go out and throw up 13 points on 26 shots and get you beat. And I think that with Duke just being so sound defensively, and just their ability to swarm you, force turnovers, rebound everything, and then go make you pay on the offensive end of the floor, as well. I just don't know if Arizona has enough pieces, especially outside of Caleb Love, to handle what Duke throws at you on a daily basis. And Tyrese Proctor's been excellent in this tournament, coming off of shooting 7 for 8 from 3, 25 points in their win over Baylor. Cooper Flagg just doing Cooper Flagg things, 18 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists in that one. Conk Nipple added 12 points with a couple of threes as well. I'll continue to say it. I think that when healthy on a neutral floor, Duke is probably the best team in college basketball this season. We're still a week or two away from really finding that out for sure. But I do think that they have enough to beat Arizona in the Sweet 16 of the East region. The other matchup out in the East is Alabama, the 2 seed, against BYU, the 6 seed. Obviously, a up-tempo, high-octane game to be expected here. Nobody plays faster than Alabama. BYU is a top 10 offense as well, led by Igor Demon, Richie Saunders, all these guys, Trevin Nell, Keba Kita as well. Like these guys can really, really score the basketball. They have a good inside-outside presence, in my opinion. They're 28th or so in three-point shooting and top 5 to 10 in two-point efficiency as well. They can get the ball inside. They can make it from 3. They shoot a ton of threes, which obviously is what Alabama is going to want to do as well. This is a game where both of the teams easily could be in double figures from 3-point range, and you could really turn it into a shootout. I just think that when one team has Mark Sears, LeBaron Philon, Aiden Holloway, Grant Nelson, Clifford Amore, all these guys, I just think that Alabama has better players than BYU. And if they're going to try to play the similar style to some extent, I'm going to take the team with better players. I'm going to take the team with an All-American and Mark Sears. I think Alabama actually can win this one, maybe going away, get a little bit ugly just due to the style of play, and that I think the Crimson Tide are just that much better than BYU, quite frankly. Down in the Midwest region, again, I will be there at Lucas Oil Stadium for these games on Friday evening. The late game of the two is number 1 seed Houston against number 4 seed Purdue. Purdue has, I think, 66 miles to travel in between Mackey Arena and Lucas Oil Stadium. One thing to note, yes, this is being played at Lucas Oil Stadium, not Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So this is going to be in a massive football arena. Kind of stinks as the viewer because the seats are far away. If you're not like in the 100, 200 level, you're going to kind of find yourself watching on the Jumbotron. Tickets are outrageously expensive. I'll tell you that because Kentucky, Tennessee, and Purdue are all in this region. But still, all that being said, like the sight lines are going to be different too. Like I think you'll maybe see some teams not shoot it as great, which with the way the Houston guards, could it be an off night for Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and those guys from the on the arc? Like I never have any questions about Braden Smith, and I think that he's a guy that can win his matchup with Milo Suzan. But then going beyond that, like the physicality of this Houston team and the way that Coach Kelvin Sampson's teams are going to get after you, body you up, make it physical. Like, is Fletcher Lawyer built for that? As a freshman, is CJ Cox built for that? Or some of these other guys, outside of Trey Kaufman-Wren, does Purdue have the physicality and the toughness to hang with this Houston team? Personally, I don't really think so. Even as good as Braden Smith is, I don't know if just ball screen and roll Smith and Kaufman-Wren all game is enough to beat a team as good as Houston is. Travis chimes in, Duke would beat the Wizards. Duke might beat the Wizards, so Duke will be fine against Arizona. Also says, which 1 seed has the best chance of losing in the Sweet 16? I'll go ahead and answer that before I get into the Tennessee-Kentucky game, because obviously I'll probably talk about that one more than all the other matchups combined. I think there's reason to believe that Auburn is vulnerable just because they've looked kind of vulnerable. So, going back to losing the last 2 regular season games, getting knocked out of the SEC tournament, they weren't overly impressive really in either of their first 2 NCAA tournament games. They only beat Alabama State by 20 in the first round. They kind of played with their food a little bit on their way to win by 12 against Creighton as well. So there's some vulnerability there. I just don't know if I love the matchup for Michigan in that one. So I would honestly probably say Maryland over Florida is the most likely 1 seed upset, just because I think that Maryland has some firepower. They have the front court to match Florida's, as well. And if it can just get into kind of a my five versus your five situation, Maryland's going to stack up very well with a lot of teams across the country when that is the case. So I would actually say, if you're asking me which number one seed has the best chance of losing, I would say that the answer to that question is probably Florida. Again, and it's really more of a testament to Maryland than it is a shot at Florida, because I think that otherwise Auburn looks the most vulnerable of the one season. Like I said, I just don't think that I don't really see a scenario where Purdue beats Houston, and quite frankly, I don't really see a scenario where Arizona beats Duke either. So I would definitely be sticking over there with one of those two matchups. Then the final Sweet 16 matchup to discuss is number 2 seed Tennessee versus number 3 seed Kentucky. Again, this is the first game of the Midwest Regional in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. Excuse me. I believe it's a 7:39 tip or something like that. Obviously, Kentucky has been a different team defensively over the last 6 weeks or so. I've probably said this stat not just on this show, but on shows all across the country a million times over the last few weeks. But since February 8th, per Bart Torvik, Kentucky has the number 10 adjusted defensive efficiency in the country. It's no longer a small sample size, folks. That's 13 games. That's like over 6 weeks of data that Kentucky has been the 10th best defensive team in the country during that span. Conversely, Tennessee's 26th during that time. I know in Tennessee still third in KenPom, and Kentucky's 45th, but it shows during here recently, Kentucky's been one of the best defensive teams in college basketball. They really flexed their muscles, I thought, to begin the NCAA tournament here as well. Great defensive execution against Troy. Great defensive execution and game planning against Illinois. You saw it in both of the games. You'll have to do it again against Tennessee, because though they aren't super, high octane, powerful offensively, they are efficient. They're like 17th or so in KenPom, I believe, on offensive efficiency. Kai Ziegler is a maestro in the ball screens. Chaz Lanier is obviously capable of getting hot in their floppy action and making a bunch of threes. And he's probably due for it against Kentucky, because in the first 2 games combined against Kentucky, Chaz Lanier scored just 25 points and was 3 of 17 from 3-point range. Contrast that to what he did in the first 2 games of the NCAA tournament against Wofford and UCLA. In those 2 games, Chaz Lanier combined to score 49 points and shoot 10 of 18 from 3-point range. So Kentucky's going to have to do a great job on Chaz Lanier once again. The other thing to think about with this matchup, Kentucky played one of the games without Lamont Butler and essentially without Andrew Carr as well. And then in the second game, when Kentucky won, Lamont Butler went out with about 8 minutes to go and did not return. You still had a limited Andrew Carr. He was coming off of the bench at the time, but you did have Jackson Robinson in that game. Now, obviously, you won't have Jackson Robinson. You'll have pretty much a healthy Andrew Carr, and you'll have a healthier and available, at least, Lamont Butler. So this will be probably the most full strength game that Kentucky's played against Tennessee. They're already 2-0, and I've said this on plenty of other platforms over the past 24 hours. I do think that this is a very good matchup for Kentucky. It just is, because, again, Tennessee's not going to go out and hang 90 to 100 points on you. It's pretty much just not going to happen. I mean, maybe famous last words. I'll be on Old Takes Exposed again when Tennessee goes out and puts 97 points on Kentucky on Friday. But I feel pretty comfortable saying they're not scoring 90 to 100 points. And when teams can struggle to, really light up the scoreboard, Kentucky generally finds a way to score enough points to win. And then also the way that Tennessee guards lends itself to what Kentucky wants to do offensively. Yes, they take you out of some ball reversal. They pressure the ball. They're going to force some turnovers. They kind of take you out of what you want to do offensively, but they also help super aggressively with 2 hands and 2 feet. And they're willing to give up a lot of inside out, catch and shoot, rhythm 3-point shots. That's why Kentucky went 12 of 24 in each of the first 2 games against Tennessee. And I think that if Kentucky makes 12 threes again, which, unless Tennessee completely changes their defensive game plan, Kentucky's going to have the shots in the air to make that happen. Then I think you can see that again. That's what I said on one of our KSR YouTube shows earlier today, was that I think that Kentucky is going to have the shots in the air to beat Tennessee for a third time. Now, if Kentucky goes 7 of 26 from 3, they're probably not going to win the game. But Kentucky's going to have an opportunity to make double-digit threes, and good shooters are going to have opportunities to get some threes off against Tennessee. If they make enough of them, then they are probably going to advance to the Elite Eight. Because I really just I like this matchup, and I think that it's one that Kentucky can win by getting to 73 to 83 points. And I just think it's really hard to keep this team execution wise, and especially with the way Tennessee guards the 3-point line. I think it's hard to keep Kentucky from doing that, quite frankly. But that's why we play the games, and we're going to get a feel for that on Friday night. Eli Spencer jumps into the chat and says, I feel like the tournament winner will come out of either the East or the West. South and Midwest seem a bit weaker in my opinion. You know, going into the NCAA tournament, that would have been hard to say to some extent because Auburn was number one overall seed. And, so for so much of the season they were obviously putting together a historic season. But I would kind of tend to agree with you that right now, I think the two best teams are Florida and Duke. Now, I think Houston's really good, and I would probably want to include them in that. But I think that when you get beyond Houston in that Midwest region, like I don't think Tennessee's the best 2 seed. I love Kentucky, but as currently constructed, I don't think that they're necessarily still a championship contender. I don't see Purdue getting past Houston, and I don't see them as a championship contender. So I do think the depth of the Midwest region leaves a little bit to be desired, though I would like to include Houston in the conversation of tournament winners still at this point. And I also think that, it's certainly too early to write off Auburn because, let's face it, they were who they were for a heck of a lot longer this season than where they've been slightly underwhelming. And again, that's graded on a very harsh curve of what they were before some of these more recent losses. So I still think it's number 1 seeds versus the field going in to the Sweet 16, but I'm really excited to get games back on the television screens on Thursday evening. As those games are going to be Florida, Maryland, and Texas Tech, Arkansas, along with Duke, Arizona, and Alabama, BYU, and then leaving the South and the Midwest regions for the games on Friday. But there you have it for this week's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Again, I will be in Indianapolis for the Midwest Regional at Lucas Oil Stadium on Friday night watching Tennessee versus Kentucky, and then Houston versus Purdue. Most likely will be in the gym on Sunday. Well, I'll definitely be in the gym on Sunday if Kentucky wins. I'll quite possibly still be there on Sunday, even if Kentucky loses. Also have the IHSAA Boys Basketball State Finals on Saturday. So for any of you that know me, know that this is going to be a pretty special weekend in Indianapolis, getting to watch Kentucky in the Sweet 16, and then 4 Indiana High School Basketball State Championship games on Saturday. So it'll be a long weekend in the gym for me, but that is exactly how I like it. Again, please make sure you are subscribed to us here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. Please leave this video a like if you did enjoy this week's episode of All Fired Up. Also, as I mentioned, I have a Chalk Talk episode out from earlier this morning breaking down Kentucky's defensive execution against Illinois. So please go watch that video and leave it a like as well. I thought it turned out really well. I'll have a Zoom action episode on the KSR YouTube channel coming out probably later tomorrow evening, which will kind of preview Kentucky's matchup with the Tennessee Volunteers. As always, I'll have my pregame scouting report on Tennessee up on KentuckySportsRadio.com as well. Best place to stay up to date with all of that and anything that I'm doing March Madness related throughout the rest of the tournament will be to follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Thank you all for being here live. Thank you all for watching in the future as well. At any point, please leave a comment and I will get back with you. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you all have a great weekend and enjoy March Madness, getting back in action tomorrow evening, Thursday evening, and have a great rest of your weekend and the rest of the NCAA tournament. Thanks for being here.